r/AskReddit. Teachers, what's the darkest thing you've seen from a student? Our school had a selective mute kid that graduated last year. Kids were calling him Fish Boy. It turns out he was buying fish and killing them in various ways on Instagram, based on people's requests in the comments. In elementary school we had a kid with a severe peanut allergy and a teacher caught some kids rubbing peanut butter on the opening of his water bottle. We also had a kid who could describe in detail about how to prepare heroin. Kid seemed down, and I asked him to please tell me what was wrong. Not today, but when you're ready. I was his last class of the day and he promised he would. End of the year comes, and he told me his brother killed himself. He said he thought about the same many times, but always remembered that he had made me a promise. I made him promise to call me if he ever thought he might again, and he promised me again. He's doing amazingly well, and is about to graduate from college. I'm a teacher. A student saw one of my former co-teachers at some point with his wife and thought she was hot, and my co-teacher took advantage of this to get the student to secretly record his sister taking showers and shit. He offered videos of his wife performing sexual acts on / with him to the student in exchange. He finally got caught when the student blackmailed the teacher into trying to get the wife to fuck him, and when he proposed it to his wife, she called the cops. I taught welding and metal sculpture at the high school level for a year. One morning, one of my students, a quiet, awkward, but really nice young man, came into class and asked me for a band-aid. I asked him what for, and he replied that it was for a burn. Class hadn't started yet for the day. He showed me, and it was a fresh second-degree burn that was already blistering. It was in the shape of an R. Some kids, if I'm going to be honest, they were bottom performers and troublemakers from a different class of mine had swiped a small metal letter from one of my supply bins, heated it with a lighter, and then branded this kid on the morning school bus. He had let the kids do it because he really wanted to fit in. He didn't have many friends and these kids had seemed cool because they were always acting out. As a mandatory reporter, I reported it. The police got involved. Other than that I have no idea what else happened. Girl was going through a lot. Unprompted told me that her older brother died in Iraq recently and that was why she was having such a rough time. I tell all her teachers so they know it's thing to be aware of. I'm super nice with her and supportive. Eventually I tell the counselor and he calls home to ask if the family needs anything. Turns out she has never had a brother. Edit FYI, she was 11 years old. I had a third grader tell me in excruciating detail about every time that he's been removed from a home, starting with how he was taken from his mother at 2 because they found drugs in his crib. Imagine the toughest baddest little dude you can and multiply the attitude by 100. He wrote me a note at the end of the year saying that I was a great teacher because he knew I loved him even when he was bad. It has been and will always be the best note I ever get from a student. In that same class, I had a little boy try to cut his wrists with scissors saying that he didn't want to be here anymore. Cops came to interview him and said they were just kid scissors, so it wasn't a big deal. Thankfully, mom took it seriously and got him the help he needed. A list simply entitled "The List with a few students' names and my co-teacher's name on it" was a student with some serious behavioral disabilities on it who admitted it was a kill list. Edit, RIP my inbox. Lots of people on here who experienced something similar. No, this was not recent. The student received appropriate support after this incident. I've got two. I had a student casually tell me about how he pulled the eyes out of his rabbit's head. He explained how there was blood everywhere. This was my first day working as a supply teacher at that school and my first conversation with the student. I later brought it up to support staff and they were shocked he mentioned it to me. Apparently he killed his rabbit because his mom loved it more than she loved him. The boy was now in foster care as his mother was a drug addict. He shared a lot of really dark stuff with me that day. Another one, more sad than dark, was at a different school. Students had to write their address for an assignment, but this 4th grade girl didn't know hers. Another student asked me, "Do you know where the so and so motel is? She lives there." Really broke my heart, as this girl was so young and innocent, and didn't really understand how unfortunate her living situation was as she proudly googled the motel and found her address. Really low income part of town. I teach an algebra class, and I was explaining how, in our city at least, your address tells you how far you are from the central streets like a Cartesian coordinate system. A girl, who happens to be my daughter's friend, volunteered to let me graph her address. 3 months later a boy got expelled for threatening to shoot up the school. He had her address and written threats to kidnap her from her house. He got the address from that class. I teach teens with emotional/behavioral disorders as their primary disability and learning as a secondary. Anyways, seen lots of shit, but I'll narrow down to these two. First one, student D was hard to connect with. He was so disconnected from his peers even. He was on the smaller side and lacked confidence. D was the head down disengaged type that usually took a little longer to build a trusting relationship with. I just assumed this was his coping mechanism at school. One day he was gone, and another student announced that it was for molesting his little sisters. It turned out there was a big bust in our area within his trailer park, where children were just being passed around between convicted sex offenders and used to create porn. The reason truth unfolded was because his little sister's teacher noticed that she had bled through her clothing in her first grade class. His little sister admitted that he had been abusing her for longer than she can remember. The most upsetting detail I remember is that his mother was allowing it to happen in exchange for child care and money. He ended up in a juvenile detention center before his court date. Because he had an IEP, I was still responsible for providing instruction to him. What that meant was I would send a packet of math worksheets to his tutor at the center. Every couple weeks they would get sent back to me for grading. The first time I received his work there was doodles and symbols. The next time, he started to write phrases. By the end of the semester, he wrote "me please" to help him all over his pages. Later on I found out he was being victimized simultaneously by an older man he met on the bus. He is now married and has a child of his own. You've made it to the end. Please like and subscribe to see more videos.